Okay, so just for a bit of a follow-up to yesterday's dramatic developments, shocking developments, because I was making that video as the news was ongoing, so I was kind of distracted by the news. Um, Trump's come out and said that there's going to be an orderly transition. It sounds like he's now trying to get into damage limitation mode. Here's the thing. I was talking to my dad about this, and he made this point. I think he's right. Um, Trump's kind of lit the fuse, and even Trump now sort of knows it's getting out of control. So even if he finally shows some responsibility and condemns the violence and like really bluntly tells these people not to go home, yesterday was pathetic. What he done was praise them, call them special people. He refused to condemn the violence. He said, "Oh, go home because we don't want anyone to get hurt." Well, unfortunately, people were hurt. Four people died. Apparently of medically induced injuries that can mean any number of things. There is some information now about the woman who was shot. Apparently, she's a former Air Force captain, and she was one of the protesters. Um, she was shot by a plainclothes officer. It is sad, of course it is, but she was breaching national security. What did she expect? And if that sounds harsh, I really do believe these people are a threat to American democracy. I mean, it's very sad. I'm sure she leaves behind a family, maybe children. It's an awful thing. But many of these people were armed. They were storming the seat of government. Of course, there's going to be a response like any other, basically terrorist attack. You know, if a group of people stormed the Houses of Parliament with weapons, they would be shot. And I imagine that's the same in any other country in the world. A group of people tried to storm the Elysee or the Kremlin or the Zhongnanhai, the People's Congress in China, any other major power, it'd be a similar response. In fact, one of the big questions from yesterday is how they breached it in the first place. So, whilst I don't take any pleasure from this woman's death, the context needs to be understood because, unfortunately, now she's probably going to be martyrized. The Trump people are going to hail her as a great patriot, and it sounds cold to speak ill of the dead, but what she was doing wasn't patriotic. But I think unfortunately that's going to happen now. She's going to be turned into a martyr, and the temperature's only going to rise. But this was a situation brought on by their antics. Um, as for the other three deaths, it's very hard to imagine that it's not connected to yesterday's events. But I was even hearing about was it the 26th Amendment? Can't remember if it's the 26th or 36th Amendment. I need to catch up on that. But about basically, as I gather, stripping Trump of all presidential powers now, not in 14 days, right now, and basically installing Pence as like an interim president. Mike Pence has shown a lot more leadership than Trump has, but Pence doesn't have anywhere near the cult-like following that Trump has. Um, I mean, aside from the fact he's pretty conservative, Pence is in many ways just a standard politician. Trump is he's a cult leader. I think that's what he is. Um, on CNN, one of the correspondents of Erin Burnett, it was, she said nothing like this has happened since the British burned the White House. No one else has breached the Capitol building. I was trying to think back when there was similar scenes of this. I was thinking, okay, maybe some of the Vietnam War protests in the late 60s. I know the Democratic Convention was attacked. But I don't think the Capitol building was stormed at any point. There was protesters outside. I don't think it ever got stormed. In 2000, when there was, considerable anger over the fallout from the Bush versus Gore situation, Al Gore showed responsibility. He accepted the Supreme Court result. Now, history might say that was the wrong decision, but Gore saw the bigger picture. You know, you didn't see Democrats trying to storm the Capitol building then. Now, one of the things that emerged from this is the allegation of double standards from the media, and I have to say I agree with that. As much as I have no respect for these Trump extremists, there is double standards because last summer when the far left rioting was going on, whether it was Antifa or Black Lives Matter or their affiliates, clearly there was looting and rioting going on. Now, CNN kind of grudgingly condemned it, but it was very lackluster. The whole angle they were pushing was, oh, it's a minority of extremists, but most people are peaceful. Most is quite a strong word in those, you know, given the extent of the violence that was going on. Um, and you know, CNN has failed to introspect, utterly failed to introspect. I think that this is a very dangerous situation because I don't think it's going to end when Biden's inaugurated. As much as I think Biden's showing leadership and presidential behavior, I don't think one man can end the current situation. I think these hardcore Trump supporters are convinced that they have a duty to somehow take this back, even though the Supreme Court, Congress, local courts, election adjudicators, just about everyone except Donald Trump and his inner circle has determined that Biden's the winner. You know, they are convinced that Trump's right and everyone else is wrong. Now, I've seen this mentality at play. Last night, I would say in comments like, oh, it wasn't Trump supporters, it was Antifa in disguise. That to me is ludicrous. I've no time for Antifa. I think they're extremists. They're violent. They often wear masks, etc. But I was listening closely to the developments last night, and you know, seeing journalists were being followed like, what's Jake Tapper saying? That is not something Antifa would say. That is angry Trump supporters. I think Antifa is capable of a lot, but I think that's giving them too much credit. Um, and this only follows what they tried to do in the state capital of Michigan last year, so it's totally plausible. This is the problem. The extremes on both sides just won't accept, accept that their side's capable of anything. So it's a very dangerous situation. I do think that the media, some of these big networks, have fueled the flames by not being consistent, by demonstrating double standards. Um, you know, they haven't sufficiently condemned the violence from the left. They just haven't. Um, I mean, let's not forget 30 people died in the unrest last year. Um, Whereas when it comes to this, they're all over it and it's domestic terrorism. So I think they're probably right. I think it probably is. But I don't think CNN has particularly helped the situation. I think Trump's been a disaster, fueled the flames. But I don't think CNN's particularly helped either in their extreme bias. And I'm not talking about bias against Trump. I don't think there is bias against Trump individually so much. I think it's more bias about the situation and bias about particularly how they deal with racial subjects. I mean, CNN has failed to call out racists within Black Lives Matter. They've utterly failed to do that. And they're just as dogmatic and partisan as Trump supporters. And they won't recognize it. They won't recognize it. So whilst I was angry looking at the scenes yesterday and very troubled by them, I'm also a little bit frustrated by the arrogance of people on CNN who can't introspect and consider, well, maybe, just maybe we are part of this. You know, this is a crisis for America because these images are going around the world, and frankly, it makes it hard for the United States to lecture other countries. what happened yesterday honestly looked like something that would happen in Venezuela or Belarus. Um, so it concerns me. It concerns me because you could be absolutely sure the Russian and Chinese regimes will be loving this. They'll be lapping it up. They will probably have the sense not to gloat immediately. At least the Chinese won't, because they're quite smart about that. But they'll be loving this because it means that they can then put propaganda out to their people and say, "Oh, look, this is Western democracy. It's chaos." So I think this is a very critical time. My sympathy lies predominantly with American moderate centrists, because I honestly think that both the hardcore Trump supporters who are absolutely down the rabbit hole of conspiracy theories, no amount of facts that you show them will be enough. That's one side. Then on the other side, you do get the extremes of Black Lives Matter and Antifa. I don't think that Black Lives Matter has helped to build bridges. I don't think they've done much progressive at all. Certainly not here, they haven't. Um, the only thing I'll give Black Lives Matter is they did open up scrutiny of police power. I'll give them credit for that, but that's about it. In every other sense, by the way, the Times actually had an obituary for George Floyd. Usually, a national newspaper like the Times would only do registries, obituaries for prominent, famous people, not someone who's died from, who's got fame from the circumstance of death. But I think it was probably justified because whilst George Floyd himself was, he was a truck driver, he wasn't some sort of acclaimed musician or singer or politician. Um, his death did, it was very influential, whatever you think of it. Anyway, I'll wrap this up. I'm sure there will be more to add to this in the coming days. I don't see this quieting down because even if Trump calls on his supporters to quieten down, I think the hardcore ones are. I think they're militant. I think they are. I think there's Timothy McVeigh's among them. I really do. I mean, it's shocking that bombs were found yesterday. One guy even occupied Nancy Pelosi's office. This is a major, major breach of security, and I think there needs to be an urgent review into that. Um, I mean, my goodness, if violent protesters can storm the seat of the world's most powerful country, that's very concerning. Um, be interested to see what develops from this. Hopefully, things will calm down, but I fear that something will happen on inauguration day. I think that there's going to be, I don't know, no doubt there'll be a lot more to say about this, but I'll leave it there for now.